translations is,
Nope, he's frozen. Hold on. We'll get you back. Oh. It might be his end. Things too. Let's see. Let's see. All right, Larry, if you can hear me, I'm going to call you back. Let's hope that doesn't consign us to oblivion. All right, so we're going to do that, and then Skype, and here, why aren't we, we're not connected. Thank you, Binghamton University. Okay, let me do this very quickly, make sure we're here. Oh, just 2 seconds away from where we were going. And yes, of course, you have called. No, I know, but we don't have a connection yet. So let's just do this. No, why that dropped our here. And let's just see if we'll get a login screen. No. All right, well, I tell you what, maybe, let's see, let's try one more time if we can get this. Welcome to Binghamton. Oh. Tell me that. Okay, and let's see if we can do something like news or something. Okay, now we should be back up. And there's Larry, and
This,
well, yeah, thank you. All right, sorry about that, Larry. We had our university's internet dropped you. So much for the marvels of capitalist technology. All right, go ahead and make your climatic point. Sorry about that.
yeah, no, that's about it. I mean, this is the last slide. It's just to indicate some of the, some of the processes of sort of intermovement interpretation that are going on, and which are bringing together concepts and ideas and beliefs which have evolved in very different contexts, but are working on translation and interpretation as a way of linking movements, as a way of movement building. And just to mention one of them on the slide there, the World-Ecology Anti-Cartesianism. I mean, one of the reasons that I think that's very important is because of its potential, I think, to be linked with the whole dialogue going on in Latin America, and especially in the Andes, about rights and the subjecthood of nature and interpretation of nature. I mean, I think the main point of the presentation is simply that I think this is a neglected area of work, and I think it's becoming increasingly important. And especially important given that so many Marxist scholars are now talking about knowledge capitalism and cognitive capitalism. I mean, this afternoon I was just reading an incredible sentence which I didn't understand at all from a guy called Paul Mason, who's written a book called Post-Capitalism from a Marxist perspective. And I'll just read you the sentence I was reading, which I found really difficult. It says, "Knowledge-driven production tends toward the unlimited creation of wealth, independent of the labor expended." and he thinks, this is, because we have this new knowledge economy where we have this mechanized interpretation and all of that therefore, it's independent of the labor expended. It's completely independent of human labor once you get it going. So I think this is quite an important topic to be visiting for a number of reasons, and I've tried to suggest 3 of those reasons. Thanks.
Right, thanks so much, Larry. We're going to give you a nice round of applause. And I'm going to disconnect you from the big screen for now and bring you back here after Angela's talk.
Angela, thank you.
and you'll be speaking, claiming the right to the city at the planetary scale.
Exactly.
The role of agrarian social movements. Great title.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela Serrano, and I'm a sociology PhD student at UW-Madison. And as Daniel said, I'm going to be talking about specifically the role of La Via Campesina social movement in the claim for the right to the city. So, La Via Campesina is an alliance of existing social movements who define their struggle in terms of food sovereignty. And food sovereignty it means the right for each nation or people to determine the way their own food is produced and exchanged. So I argued that La Via Campesina is claiming the right to the city, and that agrarian social movements play a crucial role in this claim. The right to the city is a concept proposed by Henri Lefebvre in the 1960s as a collective right to shape urban space. It has served as a banner to unite different struggles seeking to reshape the urban for the use and enjoyment of its inhabitants. And the movements and scholars that have adopted this banner have mostly used it in relation to cities. But movements outside city limits not only play a fundamental role to claim for the right to the city, but also have expanding possibilities to communicate and enact this claim. Or at least that's what I'm going to try to convince you about. So before progressing in my argument, I want to talk more about the right to the city. So Lefebvre proposed this concept as a claim for a collective right to shape space, specifically in the context of urbanization. And he described urbanization as a transformation of space for industrialization. In this transformation, spatial forms respond to the needs of industrial production and exchange, according to principles of rational growth. So urbanization means the priority of exchange value over use value. In contrast, the right to the city constitutes a claim for those who inhabit each place to reshape the urban for the use and enjoyment as an end in itself. It's a collective right to appropriate the space we inhabit, prioritizing the use value over the exchange value. The right to the city is a demand for an increased power of people to take decisions over the paths where people live their everyday lives. And of course, the city is a central spot for this claim, as it is the place where social relations and particularly forms of domination are materialized. However, for Lefebvre, the city is not a general and fixed category. It is a concrete space shaped by a dynamic process of urbanization. So instead of referring to the city as a fixed, bounded object, Lefebvre proposes to analyze a hypothetical urban fabric. So a society that has been completely urbanized. Of course, he's not referring to one city filling the whole planet, but a world-scale productivist approach in which every relation is shaped by the role of each person and place in an industrial and commercial network. For this reason, Lefebvre stated, quote, "I will no longer refer to the city, but to the urban," unquote. His focus was on the process of urbanization itself, not the particular shapes it takes, such as the city. This shifts attention from the city and countryside as separate objects to a process of urbanization that transforms different spaces in uneven ways, as a process of implosion-explosion. So larger concentrations of people in urban centers are coupled with an expansion of the activities needed to support the centers. That means that urbanization is producing more populated and denser cities, but also extended suburbs, more satellite towns, industrialized agriculture, and so on. The idea does not only mean that urbanization expands beyond traditional cities. It also means that as this process expands all over the world, we can only change cities or crops or any other space by addressing urbanization. The right to the city is a claim to actively participate in that transformation, in the redefinition of the urban fabric. And as the urban fabric extends beyond previous city limits, so does the scope of the right to the city. However, the idea of the city as an empirical object was prevalent in Lefebvre's time and continues to be today. According to Lefebvre, the separation of rural and urban spaces as delimited and mutually exclusive sites implies that the struggle to change the opportunities at each of these spaces are also independent. In Lefebvre's words, this operation is a blind field, in which the common process of urbanization that shapes both cities and countryside is concealed, putting the possibility to change them out of reach. As an alternative to this separation, the concept of planetary urbanization exposes how dense urban areas and apparently isolated operational landscapes are the result of the same process of urbanization. Planetary urbanization manifests itself as concentration in the form of megacities, dense downtown areas, and conurbations, and as extension in the operational places that support them, such as crops, landfills, ski resorts, and pipelines. All of these are urban spaces inasmuch their landscape and practices are directed to support their everyday operations and production demands of urban life. And this process of planetary urbanization is also creating renewed space for social movements. Urbanization, with its roads, telecommunication networks, and increased global relations, creates new needs and possibilities of encounter, in which operational landscapes become more visible and resulting struggles can gain more attention. Indeed, the concern for the practices of dispossession and violence in industrialized agriculture has sparked alliances between NGOs in importing countries such as Banana Link and Fair Trade Advocacy Office in Europe, and agricultural unions such as CITAG and FAO in Latin America and Southern Africa. Under planetary urbanization, it seems fundamental that the claim for the right to the city takes place at a planetary scale. As industrialization becomes a global force, in order to realize a renewed urban space that accords to Lefebvre's proposals, it is necessary and increasingly possible to build a movement at a larger scale. And that is precisely the role of La Via Campesina. It is an alliance of existing social movements who define their struggle in terms of food sovereignty. Again, meaning the right for each nation or people to determine the way their own food is produced and exchanged. It confronts the mainstream concept of food security, which has gained popularity among governments and international agencies. The concept of food security expresses that in order to end hunger, it is necessary to industrialize agriculture, with higher use of pesticides, fertilizers, and replacing human labor with mechanized technologies. Achieving food security requires financial investments that usually go beyond the spheres of the farm. It has a global scale and therefore exceeds the possibilities of local movements. La Via Campesina seeks to bring these movements together to confront the notion of food security and its consequences on an equivalent global scale. So the movements that form La Via Campesina carry out different campaigns and protests at local and national levels, such as demonstrations against land grabbing by sugarcane transnational corporations in Bolívar, Colombia, and against trade agreements throughout the United States and Europe. La Via Campesina also recognizes the interlinked character of their struggle for food sovereignty with issues that could be seen as unrelated to food, such as the criminalization of migrants and gender equality. So La Via Campesina's struggle is not only about food. It is a struggle for the collective control over the space and determinants of social relations. By defending food sovereignty, this organization defends small-scale agriculture and peasant knowledge as pertinent alternatives to global challenges such as hunger, inequality, and environmental degradation. It does so by linking the very local context where food production is realized to the globally interlinked sphere in which the political and financial relations shaping the current system of food production take place. So how is La Via Campesina claiming the right to the city? The blind field that the apparent division between urban and rural spaces creates, the blind field in the apparent division between urban and rural spaces creates a barrier for La Via Campesina to join the claim for the right to the city. However, understanding the right to the city as the right to the urban, as discussed here, allows us to see the fundamental role that La Via Campesina can play. Because as the concept of planetary urbanization shows, agribusiness and the push for food security are an extension of the urban in the form of transforming land for industrial production. And that is the focus of La Via Campesina, as the movement seeks to change who holds the power to determine such transformations, from those with the economic means to buy the land for the sake of its exchange value and the exchange value of its products, to those who inhabit the land or consume its fruits for the sake of their use value. By seeking to change the transformation of space from the logic of exchange value to that of use value as characteristic of the right to the city, La Via Campesina is fighting for the very essence of Lefebvre's proposal. La Via Campesina is devoted to change one of the fundamental aspects of urbanization and to claim for the right to the city itself. So understanding the right to the city in relation to urbanization and not just the city sheds light on the blind fields that the city-country divide obscures. That is, over the possibility and necessity of bringing together the interdependent struggles to transform the process pervasively shaping relations across space, that is, urbanization. The right to the city represents a banner to transcend the apparent division of urban and agrarian movements fighting for the control of the paths where we live our everyday lives. So La Via Campesina and the right to the city are both banners to unite different struggles with a common basis, but still at the supposedly separated spaces of city and countryside. So what I want to say here is that by analyzing the content of their banners of food sovereignty and defending the right to shape space, we can see that such separation may not exist, that their struggles have the common basis of the right to shape the spaces where we live our lives and produce the means to live our lives. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So we have a bit of time for questions. If if you come up, we'll have the two of you up here. If you come up as well. And then why don't we take a small group of questions? Take a couple of groups at a time. All right, bring Larry back. Yeah.
I didn't realize somehow we got disconnected.
All right. Does anybody have a question?
All right, Larry, we're back for Q&A now.
Question for any of the speakers?
Okay, cool.
Sorry about that. We didn't realize you got disconnected. Now we're just starting. Here we go. So say it loud, so especially so Larry can hear.
I have a question. I can kick us off. I love that presentation, and I guess I would ask maybe all of you to reflect on, I think, this question of the right, the connection of kind of ostensibly urban and non-urban spaces. And I guess for you specifically, I would ask to what extent you think the food sovereignty movement, those lessons can actually spill into other kinds of contestation, or if that's, what Via Campesina has done is really limited to agricultural movement. There are also obviously lots of specificities around food. And for the other two of you, I'm curious, in terms of this other question of interpretive work or Rojava's relationship to movements elsewhere in the world, to what extent this kind of urban-rural connection is able to take place, and to what extent it's not. So I'll put that question there, and then are there other questions to add for the presenters right now? Yeah,
I
Eric.
have a question for Angela about La Via Campesina. And if you can reflect a little bit on what you think is the relationship between La Via Campesina and previous moments of struggle, of campesino struggle, maybe around land reform, for example, which was the last major one. And especially if we're treating, in your analysis, right, of the extension of the urban into the rural, right? Does land remain at the center of the struggles of La Via Campesina? Or has that also shifted with the extension of the urban and the extension of industrial agriculture?
Yeah.
Question to Angela as well. Do you know if Via Campesina and its activists would like your interpretation? Does this make sense, like for activists in the global south, fighting food sovereignty struggles or rural struggles to frame the activity and their thinking in terms of the expanding planetary urban?
Great. Angela, do you want to start, and then we'll...
Okay, sure. Okay, so I'll start with Erica's question. about the relationship of La Via Campesina and previous movements. I would say that La Via Campesina is not necessarily a different stage, but it seeks to kind of like encompass different movements, including movements that are still fighting for land reform. And yes, I definitely believe that land remains at the center of many of these issues. One thing here is that La Via Campesina is also not an homogeneous movement, right? There are different struggles in different places. In the United States, it's been very active about GMOs. In other places, in Latin America, it's been like the movements that make part, that make La Via Campesina have been more focused on land. So for some it does, for some not explicitly. I would argue that for all of them, space is definitely a central topic. About Mikhail's question, I'm not sure, and I've been a bit